is making headlines once again after.
Okay, so we're gonna get started with my presentation. I am going to be sharing my PowerPoint screen this whole time so that I can show you some text and some images along with my speaking. So let me pull that up real quick. Let's see. I was just watching on my phone the video that Michael Shikashio recently put out about President Biden's dog Major having a second bite incident at the Capitol. It's pretty cool that he's being asked to speak about that, having a rewards-based trainer who actually knows what they're talking about to give commentary on an aggressive German Shepherd. That's awesome. Plus, I have a huge, huge, huge crush on Shikashio, so anytime I get to hear his voice or see his face, I'm in. Okay, so I'm screen sharing now. Awesome. So my talk is about stereotypes of rewards-based trainers. I feel like I get stereotyped a lot for being a rewards-based trainer and being a young woman. I think people have a lot of preconceived notions as to what I'm capable of and what the methodology is capable of. So I'm going to talk about some of those stereotypes and then how to discuss them with people, and specifically how to discuss them during a conversation with a client that might be calling out some of those stereotypes, or might be using a different training method, the opposite of rewards-based training, so more punitive methods. First, I want to talk about those stereotypes. I want to identify some of them. I don't know if you guys have encountered any of these. I have been told all of these before. I've been told that positive-based methods only work on small dogs or puppies. Big dogs need that more harsh punishment-based training in order to get anything done. I've also been told that it only works for basic obedience. So any kind of advanced obedience stuff, sport dog stuff, working dog stuff, behavior modification stuff, it's thought that rewards-based methods do not work as well. It's also thought of as being more soft training and more feminine training. And that kind of goes along with the other two things that I just said. It's pretty much insinuating that we literally don't have the balls to work with big, bad dog breeds that have really intense behavior problems or really strong. So we have the reputation for only being able to handle very mild issues on smaller dogs. There's also some great derogatory phrases, terms for treat-based trainers, and two of those phrases are being a treat fairy and then also being a cookie tosser. So these are some stereotypes. I'm sure you've encountered more. I have been exposed to all of these stereotypes. So I wanted to go through all of those stereotypes and mention our take on it. So what do dog trainers think a rewards-based trainer is? We're going to try and blast through all of these stereotypes just to make sure we're all on the same page. So first of all, we believe that all dogs can benefit from rewards-based methods. I don't think that we feel that only pit bulls, or rather only Chihuahuas and Shih Tzus benefit from rewards-based training. Pit bulls and German Shepherds, Belgian Malinois, Huskies, all those notoriously stubborn, strong breeds can also benefit from rewards-based training. I also feel like rewards-based training can help address behavioral problems. So regardless of the temperament, the rewards-based stuff can work. I think that we can also give more than just treats. We can toss toys, balls, rope toys, tugs. We can also use non-tangible rewards. We can use access to their environment as a reward for good leash behavior. We can use access from outside to inside for good impulse control behavior. We can use access to smelling a bush as a reinforcement for a good behavior. Some dogs just like to work as well. So there's dogs like this Australian Shepherd that we allow to access reinforcement of running through an agility course. We can also use access to sitting on the couch with us, our attention, as a reinforcement for behaviors that we like. So we're not just tossing treats. We use other kinds of reinforcers. Okay, so the next thing is the kind of environment that we're making. So for a positive rewards-based training environment is everything. Since we are not punishing bad behaviors, we need to try and do our best to set up an environment that decreases the frequency of bad behavior. So a common weakness of dogs in a training class is distraction. So if we set up the dog to be training in a distraction prone environment, like this picture right here is, we're probably not going to get very good studious work type behavior. In contrast, this environment over here looks extremely boring. There's very little distraction, so it'd be a lot easier for me to focus on the training and learn. So we have to be very aware of the environment that we're in, and we have to set ourselves up and the dog up for success. We also know that in order to get dogs to learn, we have to pay them with something. This is the crux of the logic behind rewards-based training. If I pay a dog to do a behavior that comes more unnaturally to them, that is not naturally reinforcing, if I pay them a lot for that behavior, the chances are that they are going to increase the frequency with which they perform the behavior. In contrast, if I don't pay them to do a behavior that I don't like, they're probably going to do that less. We know this. This is something that is the cornerstone to rewards-based training. We also know that we want to try and put as little amount of stress as possible in our learner. So we want our dogs to want to work for us because it's fun and because they trust us and they want to please us. We don't want a dog to work to us just because they're afraid of us punishing them. So we know all of those things that I just pointed out. We know that all these stereotypes about rewards-based trainers aren't necessarily 100% true, but the masses don't know this. And so when we go out into the world and we are dog trainers and we encounter the masses, all the human clients that we have, we can't expect them to know all of these things. And the reason why we can't expect them to know it is because they haven't had the education and experiences that we do. Think about how much knowledge you had before you started on your training journey. So if we walk into a situation and automatically expect a person to know that a shock collar is an inappropriate way to stop barking, we're not remembering that they didn't have all of that experience and education that we had, so it's unfair to judge them. So we shouldn't be disappointed when we discover during that consult that they aren't on the same page as us. Our job as a trainer is to be a dog teacher and a human teacher. A job as a teacher is to help shorten gaps in understanding between ourselves and our students. So we should expect our students to be over here. We shouldn't expect them to be all the way up close with us in terms of our knowledge. If people were on the same page as us, we wouldn't be in a job. There would be no need for us to exist. So we need to make sure we always bring in empathy and humility into our sessions with clients. So I wanted to try and hit home on all of my philosophies about approaching a conversation with the client by going through a specific example. So I pretended that there's a client that we have, a common client. I'm sure you guys have all gotten inquiries like this. And so a common client would say that my dog is barking at other dogs whenever I go out on a walk. I think we all know friends or family members that have expressed this problem to us. This is a very common client problem to have. So pretend that this person exists, they have this dog, and they're noticing that their dog is starting to bark and lunge and pull on the leash when they see other dogs on walks. The person is really turned off by this behavior to the point where they don't want to walk their dog anymore. And so they are going to try and do everything they can to get a fast fix to the problem. And so I imagine the first thing that people do is they do a quick Google search. And they might search how to get my dog to stop pulling on walks. And so Google pulls up shopping results. And so the first 3 shopping results that picked up are ones that I'm going to go through. I feel like the internet is on to me, and they've probably followed some of my cookies trail. So these results that I pulled up were mostly not force or fear-based methods, which I found very refreshing. Hopefully the computer is not just giving me these methods because they're following my cookie trail. But anyway, these 3 methods that come up are really great items that are gear rather on a spectrum of aversive gear and non-aversive gear. So we're going to go through each one of these through the client's eyes. And by the way, at this point, this person is not our client yet. She's just doing her own thing. She hasn't reached out to us yet. She just knows her dog has a problem and she's trying to solve it on her own. So the first thing she did was she bought the harness. The harness on that spectrum of gear is the most force and fear-free gear. The harness is probably the tool that we would support and recommend at first. So the dog parent gets the harness on her own and she's using it, and then she gives this review. She says, I got the harness. It felt more secure when she walked her dog, and she was glad that the dog didn't choke herself as much, so she felt the dog was more comfortable. But her dog is still pulling and barking at other dogs. And so her original problem still remains, and it remains to the same degree to where she still doesn't want to take her dog on walks anymore. So she thinks the harness didn't work. So she gets rid of the harness, and then she tries to go back on Google again and get the second recommendation. The second recommendation is a head collar. Head collars can kind of be considered as more of a force-based gear method because the noseband is uncomfortable for the dog, and the dog's motivated to not pull so much to escape that force on the bridge of the nose. So I kind of put it in the middle of that spectrum. So the dog parent tries a head collar out. And she is immediately discouraged because the head collar came with instructions. Nobody wants to read instructions that say you have to train your dog for probably at least a week to wear this collar comfortably. Nobody wants to do that. I know some of these head collars come with an actual DVD and an instructional book as to how to use it. I highly doubt that anybody ever watches that DVD. So this person did not watch that DVD. She tried to follow along with the training program that was recommended, but she gave up because she didn't get results fast enough. So she just slapped the head collar on the dog, and her dog hated it. She tried to scratch it off her face. Her dog wouldn't walk. It bucked around like crazy. And so she just said, okay, the head collar doesn't work. So then she goes to the third result that she sees on Google. And that third result is an ultrasonic walking trainer. Now, before I was making this presentation, I had no idea that these kinds of things existed. But apparently, the ultrasonic walking trainer works It's a special leash that has an ultrasonic sound emitting device at the end of it. And whenever the dog pulls on this leash, the ultrasonic sound device is activated and it emits a high frequency sound in a dog's ear that humans can't hear, but dogs can hear, and it's unpleasant for the dog. So you can see how that works. Okay, so the dog parent gets this ultrasonic collar, and she puts it on. The dog's fine with it, or she got the ultrasonic leash rather. It's not a collar, it's a leash. So she puts the leash on her dog, and the dog immediately stops pulling and doesn't bark at other dogs anymore. So the pet parent, is convinced that this kind of tool works. She's so glad that it works, and now she feels like she can finally take her dogs on walks. And she didn't have to do any kind of training on the front end. It was relatively cheap for her to buy. So she thinks that she has solved the problem and she's fixed it and she's won. Okay, so she's feeling really good. But then 6 months later, she reaches out to us because her dog has started to snap at her when she goes to pet her. She also has kids in the home, and she's worried that the dog's going to snap at them. She says that her dog has also been more snappy with the other dog that they live with, and that they have known each other for a very long time and have always been really friendly with each other. And she also mentions how well the ultrasonic collar worked with the lunging behavior that she fixed on her own. And so she's wondering if she could use the ultrasonic leash collar thing for snapping at them and the other dog. This is a very common email message that I get. Normally, people are going to reach out to us when they are reacting to a severe problem instead of being proactive. So now this dog has developed aggression towards humans in the home. And so now that's when she calls us. Pretty normal. So from here, I am going to outline what I would do during a consult. So pretend that her and I have corresponded back and forth. We've agreed on a day and time to meet, and this is the conversation that we have. So the first thing that I do is I try and organize my thoughts. Normally I do this in my head. Normally I don't sit down and write it on a piece of paper, but you can write it on a piece of paper if you want. I like to organize my thoughts into 3 different categories: items that I want to change, items I want to reinforce, and then information that I need. You guys can read what I've written in each column. It makes a lot of sense. So I'm just going to move on. So after I've organized my thoughts, I'm going to collect more information from the client. The first thing that I do when I sit down and talk with a client is I say, for the first 10 or 15 minutes, I'm going to ask you to put your dogs in a back room, in their crates, in the backyard, somewhere where they won't be a distraction to us, so that I can sit down and talk to you and get more information from you. Most of the time, clients are very, 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 very relieved to be asked to put their dog away because they're embarrassed by their dog jumping up on me, or they're worried their dog's going to bite me. So normally I never get any issue with asking them to put their dog up. So they put their dog up, and I sit down and I start going through questions. And I'm normally typing all of this out so that I can take notes and reflect on them later when I email them and develop training plans for them. So questions that I ask vary based off of the situation at hand. In this situation, I would ask how old kids were in the home, if the dog had bitten anybody, at what point she growls at people that are approaching her, what her day-to-day activities are, and how much time the client has in a day to dedicate to working with their dog. Okay, so those are questions that I would ask, and they're ones that just kind of would pop up in my head. And while you're asking these questions, you want to make sure that you're sounding very neutral about it all. There are some trainers that if question number 3 was answered in a way that said, say for example, the client was asked this question and they answered with, "Oh, my dog starts to growl and snap when my kids go to hug her." there would be a lot of rewards-based trainers that on the inside are going, no, why are you letting your small children hug dogs? You should know that children should never hug dogs. That is so dangerous, right? That's what we're screaming on the inside. That is the spike in anxiety that we have. We need to try so hard to do our best to not let that come out of our mouth. If we said that and let our emotions get the better of us, and we spoke like that to a client, we are alienating them. If our goal as a teacher, again, is to get our student from here to where we are in understanding, it's going to require us to build a relationship with them. And that's on us to start building that relationship. So if I reacted in the way that I just did to her response to that question, what am I doing with this gap? I am pushing her farther away from me. I am not bringing her closer. I'm pushing her farther away. So I need to make sure that I stay neutral, that I stay objective, and that I try and stay as non-emotional as possible while I'm gathering information. Because if I am emotional, I'm going to come across as being judgmental, and I'm going to make that other person probably feel very defensive towards me. Okay, so after I've asked all of my questions, I'm going to go to step 3, and I'm going to try and organize the conversation. I like to organize conversations in layers. I like to layer good things first, and then bad things, and then good things, and then bad things, and then good things, and then bad things. Depending on how many bad things you have and the severity of the bad thing, you might layer it a little differently. So if it was a very, very severe bad thing, like you were thinking the dog might need to be rehomed, or you are thinking that you might have to suggest that 2 dogs never live or share physical space again, that's going to pack a big punch. And so you want to really cushion that blow with lots of positive things, and then let the blow happen, and then follow it up with more positive things. So the layering with which you do, again, varies based off of the severity of the issue at hand and the negative thing that you have to say. But regardless, you're always going to start with a positive and then introduce a negative and then add a positive again. You always have to give that buffer. You can also repeat good things. So if there's only one good thing that relationship is doing at present, you can repeat that. So if the only good thing that these people are doing is walking their dog for an hour every day and everything else is terrible, repeat the fact that they're so good at walking their dog every day. Because people benefit from positive reinforcement too. If you're constantly saying, how dare you, you messed up, you're shaking your finger at them, they're going to feel very small and fearful or aggressive towards you. Treat them like you would a fear-aggressive dog. I know because you guys are dog trainers, you're not going to find that demeaning. Okay, so step 4 is acknowledge the items that you reinforce. So remember, this is the first layer of the bun. We always start out with a positive thing. So one of the most common positive things that I start out with is I say, I love that you're so invested in figuring out a way to help address your dog's behavior issue. I can tell you care about her. She is lucky to have you. Nobody can tell me that that is not true. Even if these people had used shock collars before and prong collars, I still think this dog is lucky to have a person that's willing to go out of their way to take an hour out of their day and pay $100+ for the hour for someone to come out and talk to them about their dog. That's always a positive that you can note. Step 5 starts to get a little bit more controversial. That's where you introduce your potential diagnosis of the dog. So you want to tell them what you think is causing the nuisance behavior. You will never definitively 100% be able to know what is happening in a dog's brain because you are not the dog and you don't have their brain and you're not a mind reader. So because you can't be definitive, don't talk in a definitive way. You also want to acknowledge why the pet parent may have chosen the training methods that you don't agree with in the first place. So in this example, I would want to acknowledge why they might have chosen that ultrasonic collar, because I don't want them to feel alienated by me. I don't want them to feel like I'm judging them. I don't want to make them feel like I think they're an idiot for it. I don't want to make them feel like I think they're abusing their dog. I don't want to make them feel like I think that they intentionally scared their dog. Because if I do, they're going to get defensive on me. We're going to increase the distance between learner and teacher instead of decrease it. So a way that I would say this is, because we don't want to condone it, but we also don't want to wag our finger in their face. So I would say something like this. I understand the appeal of the ultrasonic collar. It is easy to use, cheap, and it, quote, worked. And worked is subjective here. To them, it did work because the dog no longer pulls or barks anymore. To us, we know it didn't work, but to them, it did. Okay, so it worked. Your dog does not pull or bark at other dogs on leash anymore. But after learning more about dog training, I have found that ultrasonic collars may cause a bunch of other negative side effects like the aggression you have been experiencing. You can also admit your own initial attraction to those force and fear-based methods. It makes you more relatable and accessible. It makes you seem like you're less of an extremist. It makes you seem more approachable, and it makes them feel like you have been them at one point, and maybe they can be you at the point that you are now. So it gives them a lot of hope. Especially do this if you actually did use force and fear-based methods. I used to use them, and after I found that it didn't work for me, it didn't make me feel good, and it didn't make my dogs feel good, I stopped using them. That is such a powerful thing to say to a person that is using a force or fear-based method. And that's exactly how I would say it. I would say, before I got into dog training and learned a lot, I used collars like the one you have, but after learning more about dog training, I found that ultrasonic collars may cause other negative side effects like the aggression that you have been experiencing. So again, trying to decrease the gap in between learner and teacher here and build a relationship and that rapport. Okay, so all of this kind of stuff kind of prefaces your diagnosis of the dog. The diagnosis of the dog, I think, is what people pay me $100 an hour to do. I think they'd pay me $100 for the 5 minutes it takes for me to diagnose a dog. So when you diagnose a dog, you want to always be very careful about the language that you're using. Always have it be more suggestive and open-ended and not definitive. Remember that. Because you are never definite 100% if the dog has what you say they have. So this is something that I would say, and this is, at this point, we're at the second layer of the sandwich, the second layer, because we're starting to inject a little bit more confrontation, a little bit more unpleasantness. So I would say, I think dogs act aggressively because they are trying to communicate some sort of stress and request distance from the thing that they are stressed at. Notice that I said I think dogs as a species act aggressively. Not just I think your dog is. I think all dogs. Makes her feel less singled out. It makes her feel like her dog is less abnormal. Okay, I think your dog started feeling stress on leash walks when seeing other dogs. This stress may have been increased by the addition of the ultrasonic collar. The heightened stress may be causing the aggression towards you about collar grabs. So I'm being very, very intentional about just postulating here. Even though I'm 95% sure I'm right, I'm making it seem like I'm not like 100% sure or even 95% sure because I want them to feel like I'm not absolute or definite. Like there's a lot of open doors instead of me closing all the doors except one. I think that makes them feel more comfortable. So contrast this statement to this statement. Your dog is fear aggressive. You are the reason why your dog is this way. This is a very hard issue to resolve. Your dog has developed this fear aggression because she is stressed out every day because of the ultrasonic bark collar you have used on walks. Her fear of being scared of the unpleasant sound has caused her to be more stressed out, which is causing the aggression. Me saying that to another trainer, totally be okay. You saying that to somebody that isn't a dog trainer, not okay. You are going to make them feel so small. They might puff back up at you, or they might retract from you, and you're gonna damage the rapport that you have. So be more suggestive, be more open-ended, be sensitive in how you say what you say. Step 6, you're layering in the items you want to change. So this is where you tell them your plan. This is where you're going to figure out how much buy-in your client has with your training methods. This is the middle part of the sandwich. This part is a positive part because you're saying, you know, I just identified the problem, but I also have a solution. So this is considered more of a positive thing. This is the step where I hold my breath the most, because I'm reading their facial expressions and their reactions to see how much of a joke they think I am and how much buy-in they have. So this is a critical point. And again, we want to be very suggestive and not definitive in the way that we phrase this. So I like to say to people that have been using aversive methods, I want to try and challenge you to another approach on addressing behavior issues with your dog that doesn't involve using the ultrasonic collar. Challenge is such a good word. It introduces kind of like a competition with themselves, like, let me see if you can do it. It is also going to be a challenge. It's going to be a journey. They're going to have to work really hard at it. So I think challenge is a great word. I think try is also a great word in there too. I want you to try to challenge yourself. When you are thinking about your phrasing, I've kind of made up a list of words and phrases that I like to use and ones that I don't like to use so much. So I avoid phrases like should have, must have, definitely has, never, and always. And words and phrases that I like are might be. Sorry, I'm just giving my ball for my dog. Might be, I think it is, I feel it is, I want to try, how do you feel, and why do you think? So the words and phrases that I like are a lot more open-ended. They leave a possibility for something else to be true. They're less absolute. It's more comforting that way. So I want you to contrast this statement to this statement. Do not use, this should be up here. Do not use the ultrasonic collar. You have scared your dog, and now your dog doesn't trust you. That is why she's being aggressive. That is a diagnosis, but it's so much more harsh and it's so much more accusatory. You should not say that. You're going to alienate that person, even though you're feeling it on the inside. And when she told you that she used an ultrasonic collar on her dog on walks, and now the dog is biting when she does collar grabs, in your mind, you're like, no, duh, your dog is biting at you for collar grabs because every time your dog is stressed out, it hears a high-pitched, scary beat noise in its ear. I can see why it's shy now about things on its neck. You cannot let that emotion, that inflection in your voice out when you say this. You have to be very objective and very cool toned, or else you're going to piss people off or make them feel terrible about themselves. So I mentioned earlier, it's at this point in the game where people are going to let you know what their buy-in is. Normally you're going to get one of 3 reactions. The first reaction is where the client questions your plan. This is the most terrifying one for me. This kind of client is probably the one that has stereotyped me the most. He's very suspicious. It's normally a he. he or she is very skeptical or suspicious of the training methods that I have. And it's probably because they don't understand the methodology and the logic behind it. Or they've used their methodology their whole life and it has worked for them without any kind of negative side effects. So for clients like this, I like to do multiple things. The first thing that I like to do is have a empathy practice with them. So I like to paint a scenario where I make them the dog, and I have them view what I think the dog is feeling through their own eyes. So I ask the client, name something that you're afraid of, something that is tangible, something that you can touch. And normally people will say like spiders or snakes or something. And if the client says they're not afraid of anything, I'll say, okay, well then I'll tell you, I'm afraid of clowns, okay? Or I'm afraid if a person comes to my house at 2 o'clock in the morning that I don't know. So then you just take them on that journey. But hopefully they'll answer you. Okay, so pretend they said that they're afraid of snakes. So you want to kind of take them on this journey where the snake is for this client's dog, the snake equals strange dogs that this dog sees. So you want to try and take them through a fear aggressive scenario to where you're describing what we feel dogs are experiencing emotionally when they have a fear aggressive episode. So I've kind of written it out here. I'm going to follow suit with what this says. So I would tell the client, okay, you're afraid of snakes. So one day you're walking on the road and you see a snake. When you see it, you scream and you run away from it. You look over your shoulder and the snake has followed you. You're up against a fence now. So the snake is right in front of you, snake, and you're right here and the fence is right here. So you can't escape. So you look on the ground, you grab a stick and you start whacking the stick on the ground to scare the snake away as you're screaming. The snake goes away. It worked. You screaming and intimidating it with that stick worked, and being aggressive with that stick worked. The snake goes away. The next day you do the same thing. You see another snake and you start screaming, but your best friend is with you this time. Your friend yells at you for yelling at the snake. The snake gets closer to you. You still are frightened of the snake. So you start yelling again and you pick up a stick like you did before, because that worked, and you start hitting it on the ground to scare the snake. Your friend yells at you for yelling at the snake again and carrying the stick, and they smack the stick out of your hand, and they pick up the snake and they put it in your face, asking you to hold the snake. So in that situation that I painted, I asked the client to reflect. What would you do in that situation? I want them to really get in touch with how they would feel. How did they feel about all the different players in that environment? So how did they feel about the snake? After that experience, are they any less fearful of the snake than they were before? And then how did they feel about their friends? Did they feel like their friend helped? Did they trust their friend more? Are they comforted by their friend's presence? Did they feel better because their friend was there with the snake? And normally people will start to understand where you're getting at with this metaphor when you're halfway in. And they'll start to see how their dog sees things. And I do this as an exercise to try and get people to have the compassion and to see their dogs for what they are, which is animals that are capable of having that level of emotional depth. And of course, and I'm just going to decode this metaphor for you in case it was too cryptic. The snake is the strange dog. You, in this metaphor, are the client's dog. And then the friend that is with this person in this metaphor is the dog's owner. It's supposed to teach the client that them administering something scary when their dog is scared is going to make the dog even more scared, not less scared. It might stop the screaming, but it's not going to erase that negative emotion. And then if that doesn't work, I also like to do these things for clients that fit number one's description. Always, the more objective you are, the more you'll be taken seriously, especially if you're a young woman talking to older people, older clients, or to men. They'll take you more seriously if you're less emotional. That's what I found. They'll also take you more seriously if you're less extreme. So if you meet them halfway and acknowledge them more and say, hey, I can see why that ultrasonic collar worked for you, they're going to take you more seriously. You also want to state facts for people that are pushing back at you. That's one of the best things to do because this kind of training has science on our side. So we can say, hey, just want to let you know, I have a certification, a professional dog training certification through an organization called Canine Professional, CPDT. I always forget what it stands for. But I have a certification through that organization. It's a nationally or internationally regarded institution. I had to do 3 years of work before I could apply to get the exam, and I passed it. That organization supports rewards-based training methods. If you can cite literature, scientific literature that you know of, you can use that as well. You can also remind them that they have been trying option A, which is the fear-based methodology. And then you can say, hey, has it been working for you? Because if it has, why am I here? And then probably they'll be like, oh yeah, that's true. And then that's when you say, I get why option A is appealing, but why don't you try option B? Just give it a shot. That's what I'm here for. I can help you do it. You're not going to be forced to do it. I'm just asking you to give it a shot and be a little bit more open about it. So that's 4 different ways that you can try and approach clients that are puffing back up at you. For the clients that are getting very emotional and apologetic, like they feel beat up a little bit, and they're regretting their decision, and they feel terrible that they created a dog that was more fear aggressive, and they start crying sometimes. You want to remind the client of how amazing they are of a pet parent, and go back to the items that you want to reinforce to begin with, and feel free to repeat them. So remind them again how lucky their dog is to have a parent that cares so much about them to pay you to come to their house for $100 an hour. And remind them that behavior is modifiable. That's your job as a trainer, to modify the behavior to help her dog. Remind them that you're going to be there to help them all the steps of the way. You can also remind them that this issue is a very common one, that she's not alone in having a dog like this. She's not the only one that has used an ultrasonic collar before. You can also reiterate why you understand that she chose to use an ultrasonic collar. Just anything you can do to kind of help her decrease the blame that she's put on herself is going to be helpful. And then for those people that are super excited and ready to try out the plan, you would just reinforce that enthusiasm. You can say, yeah, I'm so excited that you want to learn. You're going to learn a lot, and I'm happy to be there with you on your journey. They're the easiest ones. Okay, so now we're on to the last couple layers here. And the last part is laying out of a plan. This is where you give them options. If you only give one option to a person as to fix the problem, they're going to feel walled in. You want to have as many doors open as you can, even if it's just one other one. So give them lots of options. So important. Normally, I give options that vary based off of difficulty of them executing it. So option number 1 is always going to be the easier one. Option 2 is going to be a little bit harder. Option 3 is going to be the hardest. Option 4 would be super hard. And the degree of difficulty is always in the context of how hard it is for the human to work. I think the dog is going to succeed if the human puts in the work. So it's more regarding how hard the human has to work. So in this situation, these are the different options I would give for this woman and her dog. Option number 1 is always management. Management on its own. It's always its own option. This is the easiest thing that I think people can do because it's something that we can do right now to prevent this behavior. I always present it as a way to help immediately lower their stress level too and their dog's stress level. And I also admit to it sounding like it's a cop-out because I think that it does sound like a cop-out. I mean, I'm not training the dog to do anything. I'm literally just preventing it from practicing the bad behavior. So people kind of squint their eyes at it and they're like, is that really anything? And then they're also like, well, I don't want to have a dog that has to be walked in special places. I want to be able to take it to a dog park. And then if they come at you with that, you want to say something like, well, what would you prefer more? Just being able to walk your dog tomorrow without it barking ever? Or taking all the pain, sweat, and tears and tumultuousness of walking your dog in an area with a park. Like that goal is a good goal to have, but it's going to take a long time to get there. So let's do an easier goal first so that you can be happy and your dog can be happy quicker. So that is a common pushback that I get about management. But once people do it, they're like, oh my God, this is so amazing. Thank you so much for telling me. I can breathe so much easier. My dog can breathe so much easier. Management is great. So for this dog in particular, I would recommend that they just walk in areas where there's less dogs. That can be really easy. If you have a dog that's just reactive to other dogs, just take them to places that dogs normally don't go. So church campuses, school campuses, shopping strip malls, parks on the weekdays while most people are at work and not walking their dog, parks where the weather isn't so good, so like cold, overcast days, and parks during times where there's not daylight. So you're pretty much going places where there's not many people walking their dogs, or you're going at times where there's not many other people walking dogs. And then for the collar snapping, I would say take her collar off when she's in the house so that they don't go to grab for her collar. So if we can take her collar off that the humans are relying on to grab and drag her places, they can't do that anymore if the collar's not there. So the human should stop that behavior, and that'll make the dog feel more comfortable. And of course, we're also not using the ultrasonic collar anymore. That would be mandatory. Okay, option number 2 is management and training. The kind of training plan that you recommend can differ, and that's what would give you different options. For reactivity, I feel like the training that I recommend is normally always the same. There's not many variances on it. So I would talk about the kind of training that we would be doing. I would not get in depth here. I would not sound like Hannah Brannigan's Drinking Out of the Toilet podcast. So don't get very verbose when you are explaining it. I know I just got verbose by using the word verbose, but don't get very like high dictiony. Don't use technical training terms because they're not going to know it, and it's going to make them feel like crap, I really don't know anything about dog training. So try and use words that are easily digestible. There's some words that you can't get around, like desensitization and counter conditioning are ones that I've never really been able to find another like simpler word for. But okay, so whenever I introduce the training program, I always say that management and training happen in conjunction with each other for BMOD stuff. We can't rely on training to work immediately like we can management. So we're going to do like 95% management on the front end and 5% training. And then eventually that shifts to where we're doing 80, 20, 70, 30, 60, 40, 50, 50. And then eventually we're just having to manage it 10% of the time and rely on training 90% of the time. And that's what people want to get to, because sorry. One of my dogs just resource guarded something. Okay. So yeah, so eventually we want to get the client to where they're not having to worry so much about their management. But that can only happen when training has really come into play and we can rely on it more. We also want to get ahead of the pitfalls of rewards-based training. It takes a long time sometimes, and I never want a client to feel like I don't know that. So I get out ahead of that and I say, it's going to take time because they're not going at our pace, they're going at your dog's pace. And that it's going to feel like it's taking forever, like washing paint dry, because the logic behind it is so incredibly simple. Just the time it takes for you to see fruits of your labor can take a while. I also want to recommend to find success in baby steps. That's really big too. And I sometimes identify what those baby steps are later on in the training program. All right, almost done. So step 9 is ask them how they feel about the options you laid forth. So I gave you option 1 and 2, and I always want to ask them, which one do you think sounds most feasible given your lifestyle? I'm not going to recommend an intense training program for a mother that has 3 young children and 3 other dogs and a full-time job. Like that doesn't seem realistic. I know from working with my dogs that have reactivity issues, it can feel like a part-time job. And so that training program does not match that client. So that client might just choose to manage the dog, or do day training with someone else, or hire a dog trainer and a dog walker. Same thing, so that the dog walker can do the training at the same time they're walking. And if the client told me that option 2 didn't work, which is the ideal option, of course, then I would try and get more creative like I just did and offer different solutions, like having a dog walker that is a dog trainer that can work the dog's reactivity while they're being walked. And then you want to ask them how they feel about the suggested training program. So pretend that the client did have time to do the training sessions. I would ask them how they feel about it. Do they think that their dog needs it? Sometimes we're totally wrong, and we think that this reactive dog can't handle seeing another dog 200 feet away. And then at this part of the conversation, the client was like, well, he can walk next to dogs, okay. It's just one type of dog, like a big black dog, a fluffy dog, or only small dogs. And so this question is really important to ask because it allows them to reflect on the training program and how it relates to them. And then it also allows you to reflect on the training program and make sure that it fits the dog. And then you want to ask if they have any questions about it. I never want to leave a client feeling like they misunderstood me or that I misunderstood them. So I always want to end with that question. And then my last step is kind of like a namaste step. I say, thank you for trusting me to help you with your dog, because I know you love your dog a lot. And it's an honor that you asked me and picked me to come out here to talk to you about it. And I just included some pictures of all the dogs that I've worked with recently. So this is my talk. I hope it helped you some. If you're interested in asking any more detailed questions about this kind of thing, let me know. I'd be happy to answer them for you. I will give my email in this slide that I'm about to make. so that you can ask me questions that you have. Let's see. I'll also include my Facebook profile so you can send me a friend request if you want. And my email is my first name at the company that I work for. And then my Facebook is, let me copy it. And you can Facebook message me too if you want. Feel free to message me if you want. Okay, so there it is. Thank you guys. I appreciate you for listening to me. Sorry we had some distractions. My dogs certainly aren't angels. So again, thank you for bearing with me through that. Again, don't be shy, ask questions if you want. I am going to stop screen sharing so I can properly say goodbye. I hope to hear from some of you later. Bye.